Okay. Are we online? Are we still on backstage or
No, yeah, we
gone
are
back?
on live. We are on live. We invite you for the Global Virtual Summit 2024.
Excellent.
Now, Rohit, I will
Hello,
introduce you the
everyone.
bio.
Yes, thank you.
Devika Valsra is a prominent HR leader with over 18 years of experience in the MENAT region and recognized as one of Asia's rising 100 women power leaders in 2023. Okay. She specializes in tech-focused HR leadership and organizational development. As the founder of Aham Consulting, she provides customized HR solutions that align with business goals. Previously, Devika served as Regional Director of People and Talent for 7 global creative agencies and spent 12 years at IMA Group, working closely with C-suite leaders. Her contributions to talent management have earned her awards like the GCC Best Employer Brand. A sought after speaker, she has delivered talks to large audiences and holds expertise in platforms like Oracle and SAP Success Factors. Outside of work, she enjoys trekking, yoga, and meditation. That's a great bio.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Good morning.
It was an inspiring one too. And the stage is
Thank
here.
you. Thank you. So it might be morning, afternoon, or evening for those who are tuning in today. So again, welcome on from my side for the second Global Women Power Summit and Expo 2024. I am truly honored to be speaking with you today. And although we are online, I feel the power of this community coming together for an important cause. Today, with me, we're talking about breaking barriers and building bridges, concepts that are not just buzzwords, but fundamental actions that we as women leaders must embrace. To set the tone, I'd like to begin with a quote. I'm sure everyone has heard of Oprah. Think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is another stepping stone to greatness. This quote is at the heart of what leadership is about: embracing the challenges, pushing through the failures, and recognizing that our true strength lies in resilience. Our journey as women leaders isn't just about overcoming obstacles, but also about creating opportunities for others to follow. Now, for today's agenda, I will be covering very simple topics: how to overcome the perceived invisible barrier, the science and biology of our leadership styles, both for women and men, building bridges, and skills to level up, followed by Q&A. Now, before I begin, I'd like to start with a quick poll. According to you, my dear audience, what percentage of senior management positions globally are held by women? I'm publishing the poll right now. Melinda, can you let me know once it's visible to the audience? Okay, 50%, that's very optimistic. Please continue. 35%, again, very optimistic. Okay. Interesting. All right, at least one got it right. It's 29%, folks, globally, as of 2024 April data. So we have a lot of work to be done here. I'm sure you would all agree. And to make sure that we are on the right track, let's also dive into the numbers a little bit. So when you look at it from a C-suite role position, 29%. It's a 17% increase from 2015. So we are making progress, but I would say it's still at snail pace. At board level, we are at 23%. So if we are to look at making sure we have a more acceptable or even representation, looking by the trend, we might be able to hit that number by 2038. It's far off, but still, I would like to congratulate all the male leaders as well who have enabled this process. And when you look at participation as well, though globally, when you look at the entire workforce composition, women make up about 3% of the total workforce, not senior positions, just entry level and across the board. Entry level, we still seem to be doing well, but the stats taper off as we move to C-suite. And then when you look at regionally, and this is the shocking for most of us, 40% at Europe level. Africa is doing really well, especially when it comes to the entire continent and senior positions. Women are taking on more leadership roles. Latin America is doing really well with 32% specifically for female leaders who are taking on CEO levels. So kudos to all the Latin American folks in the audience as well. But Asia and West Asia has a lot to catch up. So there's a lot of work to be done. And then one of the reasons why the Global Summit focusing on the top. And we've seen this, right? We've seen this invisible barrier. Everyone talks about it. Crash the glass ceiling. But what do we mean by it when we're talking about this? We're talking about unconscious biases, stereotypes, organizational norms, which are typically invisible. And though you may see your potential to progress, there is something which is barring you from moving to the next level. What it requires is advocacy. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. When you think about the stats that we saw earlier, while women hold 29% of the roles globally, interestingly enough, you have 72% of CHROs or C-level positions, which are CHRO level, held by women. Unfortunately, only 6% of global CEOs are women. So that's a stark contrast, right? Now, when you look at barriers, we've been talking about this, the invisible barrier. There are typically two types or categories that I would like to focus on today. One is external, and the other is internal, which is inherent within all of us, most of us. So when you think about this, I'd like to first start off with another poll. According to you, how much more likely are women to leave the workforce due to caregiving responsibilities? Please let me know once you're able to see the poll. Compared to their male peers. It's not very drastic numbers. Okay. Interesting. Most of you seem to be getting it right. Okay. It's 1.4 times more likely to leave the workforce compared to their male counterparts. And that's a very interesting piece. So when you look at external barriers, you can see on the screen. Able to see this now? Yes. Okay. The external barriers are quite varied. I've picked the most intense of them because we can relate to a lot of stories that we have seen amongst our families, our colleagues, and we ourselves have gone through at various stages of our careers. So to walk you through this, I'm going to walk you through the story of Maya. Now think of Maya, imagine her, a very ambitious, talented, well-qualified young lady climbing the corporate ladder. And there is a little bit of unconscious bias. Maya's colleagues may realize, or they don't even realize actually, that they perceive leadership qualities through a male lens. When Maya speaks up in meetings, her assertiveness is sometimes seen as aggression, while the same behavior from her male peers is celebrated as leadership. This unconscious bias becomes a subtle force that comes up in conversations when they're talking about progression, because they feel that maybe she doesn't fit the typical mold of a competent leader. And then it gets worse, norms and stereotypes. Society often teaches us that men are natural leaders while women are more suited to support roles such as, I hate to say it, but HR, or in other words, taking meeting notes in strategic meetings instead of leading the conversation. Then comes the norms of looking at access to boys' clubs or cliques. So it's important to have mentorship and sponsorship for Maya, but she looks around the leadership team and notices that many of her male colleagues have senior mentors who guide and advocate for them in rooms that they're not part of. But for Maya, finding a mentor is almost stuck in a male dominated space. And then when you look around and look at the workplace culture, again, it keeps playing out. There's this invisible barrier where long hours and availability during weekends are prized over results, and where men often bond over late night meetings or golf outings. Mind you, this is a broad stroke. There are women who enjoy golf, spaces where Maya, unfortunately, feels excluded. This culture subtly reinforces a boys' club mentality, making it harder for women like her to network and thrive. Then there's the challenge of the work-life imbalance. I'm sure most of us have undergone this. Maya is juggling the demands of her career and her personal life with the added expectations from society that she should manage it all seamlessly, almost like a superwoman at the beginning of my presentation, right? As a mother, she finds it difficult to meet the demands of a workplace that values face time over flexibility. And what this transpires as is an imbalance where she has to manage time in a system that doesn't accommodate the realities of an everyday woman. And then look at work policies. Though they seem neutral, again, I'm an HR person myself, but sometimes it can serve as a barrier. Policies around parental leave, promotions, and evaluations don't account sometimes for the disproportionate burdens women face outside of work. Maya watches as her male counterparts get promoted faster because they can stay late or take on those last minute projects while she's penalized for leaving to pick up her child from daycare. Together, these external barriers form the glass ceiling that women like Maya face. They're not impossible to overcome, but without conscious effort to dismantle them, and that's holding all of us, the audience, my peer speakers, and myself accountable, it's not going to be an easy shift, but it's not an impossible one. So that's talking about all the external barriers. Now, let's focus on the internal ones. For that, I'd like to ask yet another poll. I promise you this is the last poll for today. Which habits often hold women back from advancing to senior leadership roles? So I've posted the poll right now. Are you able to see the poll? Okay. So failing to delegate, reluctance to self-promote, overvaluing expertise. Okay. Well, the right answer is D, all of the above. So most of you got it right. Moving on. So when we talk about internal barriers, there are quite a few of them. And I wanted to explain this through certain self-affirmations or self-sabotaging affirmations, I'd like to call them. I'm sure most of us have heard this, right? Either we've said it to ourselves or we've heard our colleagues say this. I'm not good enough to deserve the success. Yes? Can I see a show of hands? How many people have said this to themselves or heard this very frequently? You're questioning your worth unconsciously, even when you've worked hard and earned that achievement, that title. This belief, often rooted in imposter syndrome, quietly chips away at your confidence, making you hesitate to pursue bigger opportunities. Right? Next, I'll have to be perfect in everything to be worthy of leadership. I'm not yet ready. I need to take that next certification. I need to get a little more experience in this area. Most women tend to do this. Men don't shy away from these conversations. They, even before they're ready in their next performance evaluation, they'd be asking, when do you think I'm going to be ready? I think personally, I'm ready for a promotion, right? You must have heard this. So think about it. Perfectionism creates a false standard. Leadership is not about being flawless, but about learning from mistakes and growing. This mindset stops many of us from taking risks and moving forward. The next one, favorite. My work should speak for itself. I don't need to promote myself. This one. Do you believe that hard work alone is enough? The truth is, my dear friends, without self advocacy, our contributions go unnoticed. This idea that your work will naturally be recognized often limits visibility and stifles career growth. Think about the next one. I must make everyone happy, or they will reject me, or judge me, or perceive me as bossy, or someone who is unpleasant. Many of us have gone through this. Do you find yourself overcommitting, always saying yes to keep the peace? Most women, especially from certain regions, are conditioned from childhood to be a people pleaser. It makes it difficult to set boundaries, leading to burnout and preventing you from prioritizing tasks that align with your long-term leadership goals. Next, leadership is a masculine trait. I'm not cut out for it. I think it's changing. When I talk to my little one, I have a 12-year-old, she keeps defying this piece. But for all the Gen Zs, millennials in the room and Gen Xs, we've heard this very often. And this inherent masculine nature of leadership needs a repositioning or a rebranding, don't you think? So this self-doubt, even though diverse leadership styles are existent and we have very inspirational leaders, role modeling, more nurturing, caring aspects of leadership, women need to change that internally, that conditioning, that voice in your head. The last one, and I think that that's something that a lot of us are guilty for. I can't be successful at work and be a good mother or a partner or a friend. Can I see a show of hands? How many of us have said this to ourselves? I faced that when I was a young mother, trying to juggle looking after my child and also bring to life a career that has been thriving for the last 18 years. It's been tough, but one thing that you must choose is to ensure that there is a balance between personal and professional success, and that can only come from creating healthy boundaries. And remember one thing, I'm not going to dwell on this because I have a lot more solutions coming at the end of this presentation, but I leave you with this thought. Ask yourself, when you catch these thoughts coming into your mind, are these thoughts helping me grow or holding me back? I'll repeat that. Ask yourself, are these thoughts helping me grow or holding me back? Now, let's look at the biology of things or science behind our leadership styles. And I'm going to make a differentiation between the male and female brain. So this is a lateral view of a male brain and a female brain. Can anyone in the audience guess which is the male brain and which is the female brain? So left and right, which one is the male and female brain? Any guesses? You can drop it in the chat. Left one male, Casey. Okay. Yuretsi. Okay, so Yuretsi has gotten it right. The left one is the female brain. There's a lot more connections happening between both hemispheres, whereas the male brain, it's centered primarily on each hemisphere. There's a lot of connections going back and forth within each of the hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. So those of you who guessed right, kudos. Those of you who didn't, we'll talk a little more about it today. So there are quite a few differences. Physiologically, we know from a muscle mass perspective, we are built differently, but we're not going to talk about that. I've picked 4 key pieces: brain structure and wiring, emotional intelligence and social awareness, hormonal influences. Yes, we're to tackle that. Values and listening. So when you think about the brain structure, yes, we're to give it to the men. They have a 10% larger brain, but that does not equate to intelligence. It just talks about how the brain functions. So they are naturally attuned to focusing on tasks. Okay, hear me out fully. They are wired for focus and logical problem solving. They excel at zeroing in on specific tasks. So remember those separate hemispheres of the brain? They're working out tasks and they are able to make sure they don't get too distracted. On the other hand, female asking, emotional intelligence, and collaborative thinking. Women tend to have better connections between the brain's hemispheres, which means they can switch between tasks and emotions more fluidly, handling different stimuli at the same time. Think of your mothers or think of yourselves, right? Emotional intelligence and social awareness. So women generally score higher here. They are more attuned to their own emotions and those of others, which can make them excellent at building relationships, managing teams, and creating a cohesive and collaborative environment. I must confess, I've met some outliers there. But again, we're looking at the general. But here's the flip side. While we are very good at all these bits, women are twice as likely to develop depression due to heightened emotional sensitivity. Men, meanwhile, may exhibit higher tolerance for stress in high stakes situations, making them appear more resilient, so to say, in intense or risky environments. However, men are also 3 times more likely to develop an antisocial personality disorder, which can impact social relationships and emotional connection. Hormonal influences. So this is a common knowledge, or some of you might be hearing it for the first time. Men operate on a daily hormonal cycle. Their testosterone level peaks in the morning, giving them a burst of energy and confidence, and then declines as the day progresses. Whereas women have an advantage here. They have a monthly hormonal cycle. However, the levels of estrogen and progesterone fluctuate over the course of the month, affecting energy levels, mood, and cognitive abilities during different cycles. Now, an interesting piece, and this is the last quadrant, values and listening. When you look at this, women tend to value reciprocal, altruistic relationships, give and take relationships, focusing on community, connection, and support. However, men, on the other hand, value power, politics, and competition. Again, this is generalization. There are always outliers. Okay? Now, the interesting bit. When you look at listening, neurons in both sides of the brain get activated, showing how they engage in conversations. This is for women, okay? On both emotional and logical levels. Whereas for men, and we saw this in the diagram, neurons are only getting activated on only one side, which explains why they're able to focus on logical aspects of conversations without getting emotional, but can also lose the emotional subtle nuances when leading and inspiring teams. Okay. Now, I did not share this information to talk about who's better or who's worse. It's for us to come together to understand that each of us bring our own unique strengths. These distinctions are synergies that we can leverage. And we can create a more inclusive environment that leverages both worlds, be it in leadership, collaboration, or personal growth. Yes? With that, I'd like to have a very controversial statement. I don't see myself as a feminist, But I do believe that it's high time that we stop holding men as the benchmark of competence. It's unfair to say women are as good as men or otherwise. Women are just good, period. Again, the premise of today's conversation is about breaking barriers, and it's one of these biggest barriers that we need to break. We are both different, but we bring different, unique strengths to the table, and it is up to us as leaders to leverage it and synergize it with it. Okay? So we talked about all the theory. Now let's talk about real life examples, and that's where I bring building bridges. Can I see a show of hands? How many of you recognize this lady? I've looked up to her. She started off her career in the United States in 1980s. She started her career with PepsiCo and eventually went on to become one of the few women leaders, women CEOs leading a Fortune 500 company worldwide, which is a big feat to have. But what does she say? She's not talking about, yes, I did it. She's talking not just climbing ladders, but building bridges, keeping that ladder down so that others can follow you. It's not about your achievements alone, but how you're able to help others succeed. The more you grow, the more you realize that you cannot do it all. And you need qualified people to get the job done, regardless of their gender, regardless of any other distinguishing attributes they come from. Okay? So that's Indra Nooyi, my personal favorite. Apart from her, I am also talking about Leena Nair. She's currently the CEO of Chanel. She started her career in the 1990s from very humble beginnings at the factory shop floor. She was the only female in the factory, the only female in the boardroom, where she eventually became, after 20 years, as the CHRO of Unilever globally. And then she made a very unique transition. From an HR position, she moved on to a senior leadership position as a CEO of a fashion luxury brand, Chanel. And what does she say? She is talking about making sure that you're not talking about the chips on your shoulder. You're talking about leveraging your setbacks as springboards for future success. It's about bouncing forward. I love it. Don't you agree? Now, how many of you have heard of Melanie Perkins? I love this young leader. She's in her mid-30s, and she's done a lot in this particular time frame. She's broken a lot more barriers than her predecessors. And something that makes her unique for me is her persistence. And I read somewhere that she had to overcome 100 rejections from investors before she got the first seed fund to start Canva, which was about $3 million. And now the most recent stats are from 2021. Canva is a $40 billion company, a tech company, co-founded by a female leader. And what does she say? You must take the courage, summon the courage to take that first step, and don't look back. Keep going, even if people say no. Sheryl Sandberg, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of her in the boardrooms, in the conversations when we talk about female leaders. She was a maverick. She changed a lot of things. And I like this quote. And can anyone guess when she said this? It's there in her book, Lean In, a very good read for aspiring female leaders. So her career is very interesting. She started off as a research assistant, a management consultant, eventually becoming the chief of staff for the US Treasury Department. And then in 2004, when she was the VP of Global Online Sales and Operations at Google, she was sitting in a meeting with a high-profile client, and she excused herself to use the washroom. And to her surprise and shock, there was no female washrooms on that floor. And that's when she promised herself, and she realized, it was an aha moment for her, that workplaces don't necessarily accommodate women. there needs to be a radical shift. And things have changed. 2008, she joined Meta. She was the CEO there. Now she's doing a lot of altruistic pursuits. But she was one of the most vocal proponents of the concept that when we talk about work, we need to think about how accessible it is to women. Simple nuances as leaders to make sure that we make the path easier for those who come behind us. And it's not all about women. For the men in the audience, yes, I'd like to talk about Howard Schultz. Most of you have heard of him. He's the former CEO of Starbucks, and he's known for his advocacy when it comes to inclusion, not just women, diversity in general, but when it comes to being an ally, he's one of the earliest proponents of talking about making sure work policies accommodate everyone on your team. And taking into subtle differences is paramount to ensure everyone feels included, to be able to give their best. So with that, we move on to a quick summary. So if you have to remember anything from this half, lift as you climb, bounce forward, take the first step and don't look back, make the workplaces work for women, and invest in a support system. Be allies, men. Some of my best mentors have been men who've been fathers and who have daughters, because they empathize a lot more when it comes to the challenges that female leaders are navigating in the boardroom. So seek out mentors if you can, especially those men, I'm not generalizing here, who have daughters themselves. All right, moving on. So we've talked about the theory, we've talked about real life examples. Now let's talk about key skills to level up. And I'm not going to talk about the typical ones, public speaking, time management, interpersonal skills. We all know that. We have lots of training that we can access. But I'd like to talk about a book that has made a huge impact in my life personally. It's authored by Sally Helgeson and Marshall Goldsmith, both stalwarts in the executive coaching space, tons of experience, years of listening and understanding what holds people back, especially women, from going to the next level. And this book articulates very well a couple of pointers or self-check habits that you can lean into to make your leadership journey a lot more accountable. Because someone famous, I think it was Peter Drucker, who said, what gets measured gets done. And it's the same when it comes to your commitment to your personal growth. It's a lot of big words. Take down your notepads and note this down, or take a screenshot, but think about it. And we've talked about the people pleaser. Remember that affirmation, which was not helping us? So one thing that you need to constantly check, and if you want to write it down, look at how you hold on to the need to be liked. And just shift the paradigm, the focus to being respected for your contributions. And this is from a business setting perspective, rather than just being liked. You can be a nice person. You can be a kind person. Definitely be that. But when you're asked to say yes to tasks, think about how that's going to help you garner respect as a leader and helps you demonstrate value. I love this one. Avoid over responsibility. I think I was very guilty of this earlier on in my career. I felt I was responsible for everything and I needed to get everything done. And as I grew into various roles, I realized that you need to drop feeling responsible for everything. You have a good team, invest in making sure you hire the best, you train them to do the best, and then let go so that you can focus your time on strategic leadership activities. Yeah, don't be that micromanager. And then accept praise. It's very, very difficult. Again, as women, we might be conditioned. Again, depends on culture. But instead of deflecting or downplaying compliments that you receive. Acknowledge and accept praise graciously. However small it might be, don't say, oh, it wasn't me, it was my team. Say, thank you, I appreciate it, consciously. And it takes practice if you've not been used to doing that. Learn to claim your achievements, ladies. Personal branding is here to stay. And you need to make sure that you have practiced articulating and owning your accomplishments confidently, be it online or offline. When you're talking to people, it's not about blowing your own horn, but rather making sure you get the credit for the work that you have done. Men usually don't shy away from this. Okay, and today's medium is social media. Leverage it. And this is something that we've been talking about earlier as well. Make sure you take that leap of faith to reach out, proactively reach out. Mentors, sponsors, and key influencers and organizations don't have the time to come to you saying, hey, we want me to mentor you.
As we are running late, so can you please conclude the session?
Of course. Thank you for that nudge. Thank you, Melinda. I'm going to be very fast. So build and leverage relationships. Make sure that you reach out to people and they're there talking about you so that you get heard and noticed in rooms that you are not part of. Say no more often. Have healthy boundaries so that you can take leadership roles, take tasks that help you in that journey. And this is very, very important. Stop overvaluing expertise. Many times people focus on technical abilities and technical certifications, focus on the soft skills, building executive presence, gravitas, and influence. Be a good negotiator. That's one skill that's going to take you very far, because know your worth and communicate it. Recognize your self-limiting habits. Get an accountability partner to keep a check on all these points that we've talked about. This is my last slide, Melinda. Keeping your comfort zones behind, keep taking those risks. Like Oprah said, don't be afraid to fail. Think like a queen and just take one step at a time to do something which makes you uncomfortable, but it's taking you towards where you want to go. Focus on the big picture. Prioritize impact over minute details. You can delegate the details, but prioritize impact. And the most important, and this is what I want to leave you all with, is develop your vision. If you have a sponsor, if you are in that elevator pitch scenario, you need to be clear and articulate your long-term goals of where you see yourself and where you want to go or how you can contribute. If you're not clear in your mind, nobody else is going to pitch your name and they're not going to make it up for you. You need to articulate it and give them the content that they can use for you. And with that, commit to not being just a diversity hire. Commit to not being just a female leader, but a leader for the future. And with that, thank you, my dear audience. Melinda, my apologies for overrunning this session. But if there are any questions, I'm all ears.
Thank you, Devika. Such a wonderful interactive session. We thoroughly enjoy your Q&A sessions and everything. In this modern era of work-life balance, you inspire many young women to challenge the difficulties, and may hope your presentation has provided all the strength to them to challenge the difficulties. Okay, we do have few questions from our audiences, but as we're running late, we'll post it in your email.
Oh, sure. Of course. I'm happy to share the answers.
Thank you.
Thank you again for being a lovely audience. And thank you, ladies, for supporting me with this talk. Wish you a wonderful day ahead.